candidate-driven market. And then lastly, on Friday, April 22nd, which is Earth Day, will have our 12th annual Tucson Golf Tournament. We hope that all of you in Phoenix can join us here in the beautiful Southern Arizona and Tucson. Please, I'd like to ask at this moment to please have you all place yourself on mute if you haven't already done so. And then for the remainder of the program, if you could put all of your questions in the chat area, and we will compile them at the end of the program during the QA session. Our moderator will pull from those questions. You will also have the option to raise your hand, the emoji section, and you'll be asked to unmute and ask your question as well during the QA session. We'd like to thank the Arizona Commerce Authority for being a sponsor of today's virtual SBIR Speaker Series event. The Arizona Technology Council and the Arizona Commerce Authority work hand in hand on many great events, and today's topic of SBIR will continue into 2022 during our signature events. I will now turn over to our moderator for this morning, Ms. Jill Howard-Allen, the VP of Research and Development for the Arizona Commerce Authority. Jill, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carla. Yes, we are very excited to partner with the Tech Council and bring this type of event to Arizona. The Small Business Administration is the organization that runs the SBIR program. Arizona, the Commerce Authority has received a grant that allows us more programming to help educate and promote the SBIR program to Arizona, which is how we've been able to do the speaker series. Next slide, please. We have other additional programming that are available to our Arizona small businesses, and we'll share this after the event. But this is given through some small grants. The Arizona Fast Grant is available through April 30th. And this grant allows you funding towards your SBIR proposal. We also have a digital platform, the Arizona Innovation Network, that has training, recordings of past SBIR events like this, and access to SBIR mentors. As Carla mentioned, there's some events coming up. Next slide, please. We have the National Science Foundation SBIR Program Manager on March 23rd, and a U.S. Department of Agriculture SBIR Program Manager April 19th. Before I start and introduce our speaker, Daryl will be setting up a poll. We'd like to learn a little bit more about the audience so that Jen has an idea of the familiarity with the SBIR program. So if you would be kind enough to answer that quick question for us, that'd be great. We are very excited to welcome Jen Thabet from the DARPA SBIR program. She has a bachelor's from Washington University in St. Louis. She has a Doctor of Law from George Washington University Law School. And this diverse background has given her the ability to be an attorney, meeting planner, project manager, and then with DARPA Program Director of the Small Business Programs Office. She's actually been with DARPA since 2007, and she is a native of New York. And right now she lives in the DC area with her two children of middle school and grade school. She enjoys exercising and cooking, and most recently has been certified as a scuba diver. So we are very happy. Jen, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we'll get this started. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jill. All right. We can go ahead and start with the next slide, please, Daryl. Okay, thank you guys so much for logging in today. I'm hopeful that this will help give you an idea of not just our DARPA SBIR program, but how to do work with DARPA in general. So I just kind of want to dive right in, right? DARPA's mission is really to create breakthrough technologies and capabilities for national security that both prevent and create strategic surprise. We invest heavily, as you can see from the slide, in early stage products and ideas, and really try to change the impossible into the possible. I think a lot of our successes and achievements really speak for themselves. Everyone knows, right? DARPA is responsible for such things as the internet and Siri, as well as lots more game-changing technologies. I like to kind of end the slide with a little snippet that I'm not sure many of you know that it was actually a small business in the DARPA SBIR program that was responsible for designing the integrated chip that enabled Wi-Fi. That DARPA SBIR from the 80s, that project really pioneered the technologies that enable wireless connections found in all of our smartphones, capable of everything, right from browsing the internet and providing driving directions to streaming music, wireless headphones, and so much more. We really try to change the impossible into possible. Let's go on to the next slide. Before I dive into the details of our SBIR and STTR program, though, I just always like to take a quick moment to highlight DARPA's commitment to small business. As you can see from the slide, DARPA committed about 28% of its available funding to small businesses, both in FY20 and FY21. It's about $598 million going to small businesses in FY21. And when I look through and see how that breaks down, it's interesting, right? 74 million went to small disadvantaged businesses. Over 110 was used for our SBIR and STTR programs, and multiple dollars in contracts really went to 8As, veteran-owned small businesses, women-owned small businesses, hub zones, and alike. The small business spend at DARPA really runs the gamut from R&D programs even down to our support contracts. At DARPA, we're an agency not afraid to take risks and even fail if it means that we move that technology needle forward. And in order to do this, we really have to partner with small businesses, because it's those small businesses that are the ones that are most able and willing to take the risks and help us advance technology. And so I think you can see how committed we are to small businesses by looking at those numbers. So let's go on and dive into now DARPA in general. Let's go to the next slide. I'd like to include this slide because it's just a quick overview. DARPA is composed of 6 technical offices, our science offices and our systems offices. And I would say that utilization of small businesses, and especially the SBIR and STTR program, is pretty evenly spread out among the tech offices. But I encourage you always to do your research, become familiar with the thrust areas of each of these offices, as well as the specialized areas that are important to the program managers within those offices. This slide really gives a nice snapshot of our current thrust areas. But the office thrusts and PM focuses shift from time to time. And so it's always a good idea, especially before you're going to apply for a SBIR or a program or a seedling, to kind of check our website, check back and see what the latest thrust areas are. Let's go to next slide, please. So we've got these 6 tech offices, and that makes us kind of unique. But there's a couple other things that really add to the uniqueness of DARPA, right? I've already said that our mission is to stay ahead of state-of-the-art technology. And how do we do that? We do that by really employing a very unique operating model. As you can see, we're a $3 billion agency that, as I've already said, we're not afraid to take risks if it means we're going to push that needle forward in technology. But more importantly, as I mentioned, we're not afraid to fail. We really are looking for revolutionary changing ideas. DARPA is a program manager-centric agency. We have our program managers here for term appointments. We rotate them in every 3 to 5 years. And so our thrust areas, our focuses are changing quite frequently. I think at any given time, we turn over about 20% of our government staff each year. That's how we can stay ahead of state-of-the-art technology, by rotating these program managers in. So in order to do that, our SBIR program, which I'll get into in a little bit, is a little different. Our SBIR program, we run an out-of-cycle BAA, so we don't stick with the 3 predetermined times of the DoD. We do that in order to be more responsive to the technology gaps and needs at DARPA, and to be more responsive to the tenure of the program managers. But we'll get to that in just a minute. Let's next slide, please. I want to talk about the 3 different ways that we fund ideas at DARPA. So at DARPA, we mainly fund ideas, as you can see, in 3 different ways. We'll do programs, which are large, multi-year, multidisciplinary efforts, challenges, and that sort of competitions on unique R&D programs. And then we'll do smaller efforts that you'll see on the right side, like seedlings, explorations, and DARPA SBIR and STTR programs. So today we'll focus on the SBIR and STTR programs, but these are basically the three main ways to get your foot in the door and work with DARPA. So let's get to the next slide, please. Okay, so ways to get started. Before we get too far in and before I give you the details of our SBIR program, I'd just like to take a moment to talk about the ways to engage even before responding to a BAA. I think this is important because the work that the companies can do ahead of submitting a proposal, I think can be just as valuable, if not more so, to you as the submission of a proposal itself. To work with DARPA, you really need to understand the agency, or more specifically, how or what a PM is thinking. So remember, I said DARPA is a PM-centric organization. We're driven by our PM. So this slide really kind of highlights some of the ways for you to connect with a DARPA program manager or just DARPA overall. It's that homework that you do ahead of time that can make all the difference between a good and a great proposal, right? So the obvious ways to get involved with DARPA are to work as a prime or sub, or to get involved with the SBIR program. And that's the program that we'll focus on today, right? But there's some other subtle ways that can really help small businesses or even universities learn more about DARPA and how our PMs think. For instance, attending an industry or proposers day. You know, due to COVID, these are all virtual now, and they really present great opportunities for you to learn not just about the program, but also to hear more about DARPA. It's also a great way for you to meet potential teammates and partners for you to work with in some form or fashion. It's a great way to network and a great introduction to DARPA. And in fact, if you can join a team responding to a program, then that kind of really teaches you about DARPA and allows you to get your feet wet before you go and prime on your own. It's always great to review the tech office's open BAAs. Those really explain the thrust areas that are currently of most importance to the tech offices, and it really helps you better understand what we're thinking. You can look for those opportunities and try to make a connection with an office or a PM. Reach out to program managers with your ideas to gain feedback or input. These sessions also provide you with a great opportunity, right, to get inside the head of the evaluator or the PM, right? It'll help you understand better what our agency is all about. And as I said, it will really help you submit a stronger proposal. And finally, the SBIR column, right? If you ask your questions during pre-release, right, that gives you some good insight into what a program manager was thinking when they developed a topic. Or if you attend outreach events like these, all that helps you familiarize yourself with the agency. So the real key takeaway for me for this slide is before you even start looking at a BAA and responding, it's a good idea, especially with DARPA, to try to find ways to engage to learn more about our agency and where our current technology thrust areas are. It will very much help you strengthen your proposals. All right, let's dive into the actual program though. Daryl, let's go on to the next slide, please. So if we dive into the SBIR and STTR programs, I'll take just a couple of minutes to go over the key components or the differentiators of our program. I've already mentioned our program's a little different. So unlike the majority of the DoD components, DARPA issues its own out-of-cycle BAA for our SBIRs and STTRs. Under this, just like in tech offices, we release just-in-time topics on a rolling basis. Our topics are released once they're finalized and ready, instead of being released at one of the three predetermined DoD release dates. Our topics are released as phase 1s, directed phase 2s, or with the option of both. So when you're looking at one of our topics, be sure to read the BAA and determine what topics are soliciting what kinds of proposals. I should mention, and as the asterisk kind of shows on the slide, the authority for directed phase 2 currently only applies to SBIRs. And as you can see at the bottom, our proposals are evaluated based on 3 criteria: the technical merit and innovation of the proposed approach, the qualification of our key personnel and facilities, and the potential for commercialization. All right, next slide, please. Now, in order for us to maximize our budget, which is approximately $110 million annually, and an attempt to try to fund as many great ideas as we can, our SBIR and STTR awards are generally a bit lower than the SBA caps, as you can see on the slide. We typically award about $225,000 for a phase 1 feasibility study, and about 1.5 million for a phase 2 or direct to phase 2 effort. It is important to note though, these are what we typically do, but there are lots of times when we exceed these amounts and even exceed the SBA caps. For instance, there are efforts that are just so specialized that there's really a need to invest a higher dollar amount in order to get a good return. And so in those cases, we go to the SBA and get a waiver to issue topics with higher caps. The other thing to kind of note is that DARPA, we sometimes invest other non-SBIR funds into our efforts, really in order to expand upon or get even greater or more refined results for the work that you all are doing. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Perfect. This is quite the slide. At DARPA, our program managers use the SBIR and STTR programs in a multitude of ways. I like to say these are tools that they have in their toolbox. So phase 1s and direct to phase 2s, those are the ways that we release our just-in-time topics. However, we also frequently utilize adoptions, which some of you may have heard of as cross-agency awards. And we do a lot of sequential phase 2s to advance our research. So for any of you that are on the line right now, and if you've ever received a SBIR and STTR, which is still eligible for a first or a second phase 2 on a topic for which DARPA could have interest, I'd encourage you to do your research and check our website. See if there's a DARPA program manager that might be interested in picking up where that research left off. To that end, right, we also work with other agencies and co-fund awards. This not only allows us to share costs and gain additional research on a topic, but typically it also helps us line up a nice transition pathway for the research. You can also see on the slide, we use our enhancement program, or more commonly referred to as a matching program, also to further our research and assist with our transition. And then our newest tool at the bottom is our SBIR XL pilot. And that was just introduced this past year. And it's a pilot that's focused on transition and really aimed at reimagining SBIRs to transform ideas into these successful businesses that can scale. And I'll go into that in a slide or two later. But I wanted to kind of include this slide to really show you that there's so many different ways that we use the SBIR and STTR program at DARPA. Our PMs have really figured out that small businesses, and especially the SBIR and STTR programs, are great ways to really do research, advance, and grow technology. So if you're not familiar with some of these other tools like cross-agency awards or co-funds, I encourage you to kind of check those out and learn a little bit more about them, because they're great ways to expand on awards. All right, let's go on to the next slide, please, Daryl. All right, so here's our pilot. So as I just mentioned, right, our new tool is our SBIR XL pilot. And that's really focused on transition, right, and reimagining our SBIRs. We're trying to transform them into successful businesses that can scale. We're trying to move away from SBIRs whose only transition commercialization path is really their next research and development project. We really want, with this program, to have these companies and our program managers, for that matter, think through transition and commercialization and where they can take this research. We released our first topic a few months ago, and we actually have another one currently in pre-release that came out last week. So with an increased emphasis on, oh, my lights just went off, give me a second. With an increased emphasis on transition and commercialization milestones, DARPA is really asking our proposers to really think beyond, right, the SBIR and advance planning and do some preparation for transition. With this program, we have increased award values, and we have a built-in matching or enhancement component to add emphasis to the fact that we really want to focus on transition. And finally, sort of in an attempt to appeal to as wide of a group as possible and really try to get some new non-traditional performers, this pilot has a simplified and streamlined proposal format. We request in this pilot, we do a 15-page slide deck and a 20-page white paper, as opposed to our traditional direct to phase 2 format, which is a 20-page feasibility and a 40-page proposal and a 5-page commercialization plan. So we've really tried to streamline this and make this something that is easier for first-timers to apply to. The goal really is to help our small businesses be set up and be able to bridge that valley of death at the conclusion of their SBIR. Next slide, please. Okay. So before I get to our transition, I wanted to kind of take a pause here and give you a quick overview of some highlights of our FY21 program. It just kind of gives you an idea of how important these programs are to DARPA and why they could be right for you. If you can see from the slide, right, DARPA has a very active SBIR and STTR program. As you see, we released 30 topics under our FY21 BAA. And actually, I think that number might be outdated. We released 30 topics before the end of FY21, but I do believe we released 2 more as well. So that's 32 in 1 year. We issued about 14% of our new awards to first-time awardees, and 15% of our awards last year went to minority, small disadvantaged, hub zone, or women-owned small businesses. And these numbers are great, but I really would like to see them grow even more. That's one of the reasons, right, why we do outreach and why we're talking to you. As you can see from the slide, we not only have an active SBIR program, but we also work hard to help our performers with transition and commercialization of their programs. And we're constantly innovating with things just like the SBIR XL pilot I mentioned. You can also see for the FY21 highlights, we added additional transition partners, and we collaborated with outside agencies on pilot transition activities. The real sort of takeaway from the slide for you, though, is that our DARPA investment in the SBIR and STTR program is really holistic, and we try to provide as much support both for the program overall, where we can turn ideas into successful achievements, and also to really help push that technology needle forward and aid in DARPA's mission. So let's move over to transition for a little bit on our program. Next slide, please. So in order to help our performers and grow the technology investments, the DARPA SBIR and STTR program offers transition and commercialization support programs to all of our phase 2 performers. Through this program, we aim to help companies move their technology beyond phase 2 and transition into other parts of the government. So you can see from the slide, through the support, we try to help and strengthen our technology investments to have impact within the DoD acquisition chain and the US tech community. Next slide, please. Our transition and support program is guided, as you can see here, by 3 principles. They're really designed to equip our participants and our stakeholders with the information and insights that they need for successful transition. So we educate, right? And that includes working with small businesses on your transition strategy. We communicate, and that includes iterating back and forth on quad charts that both the performer and DARPA really use to highlight the work of the SBIR. And these are really important because that's what we use to garner interest from stakeholders, and they really serve as the basis for in-depth transition discussions. And we connect. And that includes all the networking that we do with stakeholders, trying to maximize transition opportunities for you all. And through these efforts, we're aiming to give our performers and these programs legs, so to speak, or a life after DARPA, so that, you know, as the previous slide stated, right, these programs can continue their work and help these DARPA SBIR technology investments have impact within the DoD acquisition chain. Next slide, please. Now, while commercialization and dual-use technologies are the goals of the SBIR and STTR program, right, at DARPA, many of our projects tend to be earlier stage and lower TRL, and they usually require more R&D beyond an initial phase 2 project. So there's really no one-size-fits-all transition path for our SBIRs and STTRs. So recognizing that, right, our team is here to help give you advice on the multitude of different transition paths that you see on this slide. And this slide really just details some of them, but there are many others. Next slide, please. So this slide really highlights some of the more specific support that our transition and commercialization team offer our phase 2 performers. I am not going to go through all of the items, and this is really only just a snapshot of a much larger list. But I will point out some of the stuff that we do that's sort of unique that our performers have told us that is most helpful. We have promoted matchmaking, and that is always well received by performers, large primes, and alike. And it really helps identify interest in projects that could lead to collaboration and or funding for further development. Some of the things that we like to do too is have some of our earlier stage performers get in front of some of our primes or other agency partners and give feedback early on, because we find the earlier that you can get feedback from an end user, the less rework it can create, and the more useful your prototype or your research will be at the end of the program. Another key feature is our weekly opportunities alerts. These go out to all of our current and past performers and include various alerts from solicitation postings to topical conferences and trainings. During COVID, at the start of it, there were lots of calls, lots of solicitations, and they had really short timeframes and turnaround times. And we were told from a lot of our performers, but for these weekly opportunity alerts, they probably would have missed a lot of these postings. So these are just a couple of examples that you can see. Our transition and commercialization support program really tries to do everything we can to help set our phase 2 performers up for success. Okay, next slide, please. So speaking of success, right, I wanted to take just a moment to highlight one of our recent success stories, and that's COVA Strategies. They're a small business and they're pretty new to DARPA. They received their first directive phase 2 in January of 2020 under an I2O SBIR topic, which was composable embedded software. COVA is actually developing a customizable toolkit that provides sensor planning and processing capability to define workflows before and during manned and unmanned missions across all processing platforms. They're essentially eliminating time delay in data processing, and this is something that's easy to scale for UAVs. As an output of this phase 2, just alone already, they've already received phase 3 funding, about $280,000 or so, from a DoD Special Access Programs Office for this program. And they're still continuing to do the research, and they're still continuing to expand and grow. And this is just an example, right, of how getting involved with the SBIR program can lead to more and great things for companies like you. This is just one of the many success stories. It's just a nice one to highlight because it's a company that just started working with us and already has seen success. I'd encourage you to check our website. They have lots of examples of success stories just like this one. It might be interesting or might give you some ideas. Next slide, please. So I will begin to wrap up the presentation part so we can get to the Q&A, but I kind of wanted to offer just a few parting thoughts for you on the best ways to work with DARPA. Really, the best advice I can give you on ways to work with DARPA is just to do your research. Become familiar with the issues that are facing national security and the thrust areas that are important to the tech offices at DARPA. As I mentioned before, don't hesitate to reach out, talk to a DARPA program manager about your idea, gain insight into a topic. Remember what I said, DARPA is a PM-centric organization. So understanding the needs, the problems that a program manager is grappling with is really the key to submitting a successful proposal at DARPA. And really take a look at our website. It's got a lot of helpful information, not just about DARPA, but about our SBIR and STTR programs in general. And it really can be quite useful for you as you generate or formulate your proposal. And it always has up-to-date thrust areas and program manager information and whatnot. But remember what I said, right? These thrust areas and focuses do tend to shift from time to time. So it is best to check a website, our website regularly, and especially before responding to any BAA to make sure that your understanding of the thrust areas that are important to an office are still those main thrust areas. And that would be kind of my advice for you on really the best ways to work with DARPA. Next slide, which I think is our last slide. Oh, there we go. That is my contact information. Please feel free to reach to me with any questions that we don't get to today, or if you want more information. And that's about all I have. I will always, myself or a member of my staff will always try to respond to any emails that we get. Do not hesitate. Our job is really to help you succeed. That's all I got. Thank you.
Great. Jen, thank you. Great information. I love your new program with the slides and the white paper. That's awesome. Good way to get an introduction into DARPA. I believe we're going to be able to get access to your slides for the attendees here.
Yep, they're all publicly releasable. You can release those. Yep.
Perfect. We did have a couple of folks that submitted some questions that weren't able to attend. So I'd like to ask those, but in the meantime, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. And then Jen, I didn't get this back to you. Our poll showed that we had 13 responses. 69% of them are somewhat familiar with the SBIR program, and 7% are very familiar. We've got about 23, so a quarter of those responding were not familiar with the SBIR program, so I'm sure they appreciate it. You had said check your website frequently. Are there any email or newsletter things that somebody could subscribe to get the information as well?
Once you are a recipient of a DARPA SBIR, you get our weekly newsletters. Until that time, my suggestion is just to be checking our website regularly. The other thing, though, that they probably know is that they can sign up on DSIP to get DoD updates as well.
All right. And I don't know, Ashley or Aaron, if you could help maybe put a link to that in the chat. Otherwise, we'll get that out as well.
Yep, we can do that.
What would be the type of questions you might suggest to a small business when they first meet with a DARPA SBIR point of contact?
That's a great question. You know, the way I like to approach this is these DARPA program managers are so busy that if you get 30 minutes in front of them, talk for 5 to 10 at most, and then listen, get their advice. A lot of times I find that these companies are very busy talking through their capabilities, and then they don't have time to get feedback from these program managers. If you can send a white paper or a slide deck ahead of time, they will take a look at it, and then you can kind of spend a few minutes giving them some information that maybe wasn't obvious or wasn't something that was clear through what you sent, and then really get their feedback and listen. The way that we do business, right, is we have to issue awards through either a program BAA, a seedling, a challenge, an SBIR. So we can't just listen to what you're saying and say, yep, we got an award, right? So it's good to get that feedback from a program manager, and then they'll kind of give you indications at the end. Oh, maybe you should consider submitting a white paper to our open BAA, or you should look and maybe there's a solicitation coming out. But I find the most important thing is, right, when you get time with these program managers, really spend most of the time listening and getting their feedback.
Great. That's really good. And I think also emphasizing do your homework before. I think the point of being a past SBIR awardee or STTR awardee and understanding that could be something that feeds on a DARPA award is very valuable.
You know, it is. And I will say the one thing, and I'm hopeful that it came through, but if not, here's a little more for it, right? A lot of people think that the proposal is your first step to doing work with the government. And I would challenge you that that's your last step. When we release, for instance, an SBIR, we've got 15 days pre-release, and then we have a 30-day proposal open. That's 45 days. That's not a lot of time to put together a proposal, a technical proposal, a cost proposal, and then also have to understand the agency and what's important to them. So if you can do that ahead of time, if you can understand the agency, and at DARPA, we're a very slim, streamlined agency. That's something that is doable. The Air Force, the Army, right, they're huge, but we are a much more manageable size. And it's something that I think is very feasible. If you can do your homework and understand our agency and even connect with the program manager ahead of time, that's going to help you put a stronger proposal in. And it's going to give you that 45 days that the topic is on the street to really focus on responding to the topic and not having to learn the background on an agency as well.
Perfect. What might be an example of a timeline from an announcement to the award completion of a DARPA SBIR topic?
That's a great question. So we released our topics, right? As I just said, they're out for 45 days. We try to turn selection decisions around fairly quickly. In fact, I've had questions from people that said, oh, did we do something wrong because you responded so quick? No, we try to do that pretty quick. And then from then it goes on to contracting, and that can tend to be the long pole in the tent. But we average, I would say, about 60 days for notification. And then contracting, depending if it's a phase 1, if it's a direct to phase 2 or phase 2, that timing really varies. But we try to do it in under 180 days, if that's possible. And then really the clock just starts ticking. And as you saw on the slide, our phase 1s are about 10 months. Sometimes they're shorter, sometimes they're longer. And our phase 2s tend to be about 24 to 36 months.
Wow, that's great. And thank you very much, Erin. I appreciate, if you haven't seen it, Erin has put the links in the chat for the different DARPA resources. What type, oh, you've already explained some of the DARPA commercialization assistance, which I think is amazing. What do you see as the biggest challenge for small businesses when they engage with a DARPA SBIR STTR?
Oh, biggest challenge. I think it really goes back to understanding what the PM is looking for. I had a call this morning with a performer because they wanted more information as to why they weren't selected for an award. And it really just turns out that the performer did not understand what the PM was asking for. And while they had the capability, it didn't come through in their proposal because they didn't give enough information. And so really it comes down to understanding the agency. The other piece of that too is don't assume. If you're putting a proposal together and you need to have a mechanical engineer for phase 2, but you're only submitting to phase 1, well, you got to say, I've got a mechanical engineer lined up for phase 2. Don't assume they know that you know what to do. Make sure you're as clear as possible because they can't go back and ask you questions for clarification. So it's really sort of understanding what we're asking for and making sure that you are giving the response that wholly answers the questions that we're looking for.
Great. Question from the chat. Could you provide a little bit more about the XL pilot program? Our large industry partners, I think it is speeding commercialization. Maybe how do large industry partners work with that XL pilot program?
Sure. Well, again, so this is a program where we're really asking at the outset for you to think through transition and commercialization. And while some of you may say, well, that's the point of the SBIR program, I can say at DARPA, what we do is so early stage TRL that sometimes it's hard to kind of think through where transition and commercialization, where you're going to be going. But this program, we're really asking you to think that through at the outset. That helps us have a better understanding of where you think you fit in the market. And as a result of that, we can kind of line up those conversations with industry or with other components earlier to either get feedback on where you're going earlier in the process, or maybe help redirect some of your research to make it more useful for the community. And the other piece of it, right, is that these are larger dollar amounts. And if you recall from the slide, we have built-in enhancements or a matching program for this as well. So that's a real incentive for you too, for you on your own to kind of go out and start speaking with some outside companies or other government agencies as well.
Can you get into a little bit more about the matching piece?
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that
I'm sorry, the last part?
How does that, what is exactly matching?
So for our phase 2 enhancement, our matching program, it is a $500,000 match if the company can find $500,000 from either another government component or an industry partner to put up against the work that they're doing. So that just adds, I call it free money. It adds another $500,000 from us to really help further your research. And I would say one of the big keys for that, and one of the reasons why we have that built in, right, is again, thinking through the reasons for the SBIR XL pilot is that really helps kind of show there's an interest in the community. There's a there, and it really helps push through and drive transition and commercialization. It shows, hey, we've got a commitment from someone. They think this is really valuable too, and they're going to probably help us at the end of this as well. So we give you more money to help push you across that finish line and hopefully help you bridge that valley of death.
Great. Very exciting. And that was matching free money, non-dilutive.
Yes.
Even better. And everybody here knows that because we've talked about some of these other additional funding for SBIR. Love it. Does DARPA offer any informational sessions around the time of an SBIR topic release?
So yes and no. We don't have a session like this back and forth, but most of our topics, when we release them, our program managers put together a proposers day packet that is available online that gives you a little more insight into what the program manager was thinking when they put together that topic. That's for SBIRs. For our programs, for our larger efforts and our programs, they have these proposer or industry days.
Great. How would a small business engage with a larger company to show commercialization possibilities?
Oh, well, that's a good idea. That's a great question. So we help with some of that, right? Once you're a recipient of a phase 2, right, we sort of help match you. I will say the biggest key is these quad charts. And I will say the hardest time we have is getting our performers to generate and keep and update their quad charts. Those are your golden tickets in the door. That's what we use to put in front of our primes to say, hey, we have a company you might be interested in. But if we don't have an updated quad chart, or if we don't have a quad chart at all, we really can't get you in front of these companies. Now, the other piece of that, right, is that if you have a good up-to-date quad chart that you update regularly based on your research, you can use that too at, I would say, events that Jill probably puts together for you to go meet and mix. There's lots of other conferences as well. Defense Tech has Tech Connect, which we just had in the fall. We're having again in the spring, and those are great ways to sort of get involved and meet and mingle and mix with big primes and come see them. And hey, by the way, here's my quad chart. But that is a super important document that I think not enough companies focus on and keep up to date.
Would you be able to send us a quad chart template?
I think we could. I'll have Aaron kind of look into that. I'm sure there's something.
I know some of the other agencies have quad charts that we can also send out. If somebody received an SBIR award, so they've had a SBIR phase 1, and they sent you a quad chart, so their award came from somebody else other than DARPA.
Yep.
Would it still be possible to send you their quad chart?
Yeah, so in those cases, if you think back to that toolbox slide, right, I would encourage, and I mentioned this on that slide, right, if you've been the recipient of a phase 1 and it never progressed, or if you are the recipient of a phase 2, but only one phase 2, right, and never progressed beyond that, because every SBIR and STTR can have 2 phase 2s, and they don't have to be back to back. Then what you could do is look at our website and find a program manager that might be interested in that technology. And that happens quite frequently here as opposed to some other agencies, because a lot of times, thinking back to what I've said, right, we are not risk averse. We embrace risk. We are great with that. We have such a high risk tolerance. Other agencies will put together an SBIR and STTR, and at the end of it, it turns out for them, the tech is just so far out there, it's too risky for them to continue. So it gets shelved. Well, we don't do that because we like risk. And so a lot of times you can reach out to a program manager and say, hey, I had this SBIR and, you know, I think there's more to be done. Are you interested in the topic? The other thing I will mention, which I did not mention earlier, if you've received an SBIR and you're capped out, you've got your phase 1 and your 2 phase 2s, but you still think it's something of interest to DARPA, And then we start moving into phase 3 territory. And for phase 3, right, you can find a program manager and say, I've already gotten this SBIR. This is great research. And what I'd like is for you to kind of consider bringing this on as a phase 3. And basically that is considered like a sole source award, where a program manager can pick you up and just get a cost proposal and a tech eval from you and basically make that award because the competition has already been satisfied in the SBIR process.
So they would match you up like with a prime contractor then for the phase 3?
Nope. Phase 3 can be a government contract that's just with the only thing about phase 3, it has to be non-SBIR dollars. So they would use their tech office funds instead of the SBIR dollars.
That's great. What would be a way if somebody was reaching out to an SBIR program manager? What would be a way? How do they know who the appropriate person is, and how much is bugging them too much?
So, okay, so that goes back to the appropriate person is to check on our website, right, and find those PMs. And remember what I said, we rotate our PMs in. We turn over about 20% of our government staff each year. So if you don't see someone now that you think has your interest, check back in a couple months or even a couple weeks, because there's going to be new classes in there. And wait till you find your person of interest, and then send them an email. They will respond. It may take a little while, but they absolutely will respond. And sometimes it may not be the program manager. It may be what we call their CETA support contractor. Those are their SMEs. And in some ways, that's even better because they're the ones that they are reaching to you. They're the ones that are the expert in your area. And they can set up a phone call with you, or they can send you an email to say, we're not doing any new programs, but check back in a couple months and we'd be, happy to have conversations with you, but they will respond.
Great. What would be the top 3 things or the thing that you would like people to walk away from this session today?
Okay, so the top 3 things, and I'll sound like a broken record, so I apologize, right? But to really do your research ahead of time. It's just so important because the 45 days a topic is open is just not enough time. Like, learn about the agency ahead of time and see where you can fit. Do your research ahead of time. Don't be afraid to reach out to your program manager. If you recall from that, was slide 2 or slide 3, right? 28% of our funding went to small businesses. That is well over the average for the DoD. And that shows how we are dedicated to small businesses. And the only way that we can find small businesses is through doing a lot of these outreach events. So don't be afraid to contact a program manager. You're probably the next biggest thing that they've not heard of. And so you need to reach to them. And then it may not be in the top 3, but Jill, I'm going to mention it because we haven't talked about it. Ask questions after. If you've put in a proposal, especially if it was your first proposal, and if you're not selected for award, we try to give a nice tech evaluation to help give you insight as to why you weren't selected. Sometimes you weren't selected even though it was a great proposal because we just didn't have the funding for it. But if you have questions and don't understand, you spend all this money, you spend all this, overhead to put together a proposal, it behooves you to kind of follow up and reach to my office and say, hey, can I get a debrief? I'd like a little bit more information because I want a little more information about the tech evaluation and why I was, why something was characterized as a weakness, because all that can really do is just help strengthen your proposal. Or you could hear from a program manager themselves, you had a great proposal, we just didn't have the funding for it, right? And I think that will help you in future endeavors. And I think it's something that companies don't do enough. But my job at DARPA is not only to run the small business program, but it's also to help small businesses. And so this is a great way, it's a tool that's available that we can use to help our small businesses. And Aaron is actually messaging me and he's right. The third thing I really should mention to you all is to take advantage of that pre-release. A lot of people don't take advantage of that pre-release period. If you recall from that slide, I don't remember what number it was, during the SBIR, that 15-day pre-release, you can reach directly to a program manager. And that gives you a chance to ask questions that you may not want to ask once pre-release closes, because then we answer stuff in FAQs and that gives everybody the advantage. But take advantage of that. That really helps you understand what the program manager is looking for. So I gave you 4, but I hope that's all right.
That's excellent. We've got one last question here, and I'm going to phrase it a little bit differently, Michael. So tell me if I'm not going to do this correctly here. So SBIR companies need to be a U.S. company.
Yes.
How might a non-U.S. company connect within the SBIR program?
They can't.
Would there be a way?
They have to be US-based companies, and if research or if work is being done outside of the US, there has to be a special reason for that, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean you can't do work with DARPA. But yeah, not with the SBIR program.
Got it. Okay. While we are wrapping up, Daryl is going to send a poll question through the chat. We really appreciate your feedback. This is how we can get the information that's important to you for future programs. So please participate in that poll with us. And Jen, I just want to thank you again, and Ashley and Aaron, and I apologize if I forgot anyone else from DARPA. We really appreciate you taking the time to prepare and spend your morning with us here. Any other parting thoughts for us?
No, I just look forward to hopefully receiving some proposals from you guys. I'll tell you, I told Jill before we got on, when I looked at our metrics since 2017, we've only added 4 or fewer small businesses from Arizona. So I'm hopeful that some of you have learned something and that you guys will start submitting some proposals so we can start doing work with you guys.
That would be great. Yes, we have some very smart, creative small businesses here and through our universities. So I would expect to have some proposals here coming soon. Carla, Daryl, I'm going to turn that back over to you for any other closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Jen and Jill. This was a fantastic presentation, and I too hope that you'll get some proposals from Arizona. We need more representation, and I just thank you for this valuable information. And for everybody who attended, thank you for your time today. You will be sent the slide deck as well as the recorded presentation when that becomes available, most likely tomorrow. If there are any other questions regarding this, you're welcome to send that to me here at the Arizona Tech Council, or get in touch with Jill. The contact information will also be included in that slide deck for Jill and Jen. And that's it. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Any final words from anyone?
Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you so much. Bye. Do the survey.
Yes. Thank you very much for your time with the survey. I've already got 1 response.
All right. Great.
All right, everybody.
Excellent
have a fantastic
presentation.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.